He is also the president of the New England chapter of the International Foundation for Cultural Protection. So this is definitely something that is near and dear to his job and to his heart and everything about the museum's safety. So, Austin, I am going to turn it over to you now.
Okay, well, great. Thank you, Heather. I wanted to take the opportunity as well to thank NEMA for inviting me back to join them for this amazing lunch series, and also to, secondly, thank all of the participants here for taking the time to, of their time during their lunch hour. It's a very, very humbling experience to share with them my experiences within the museum world and what we've done, and share with them some of the ideas and concepts around securing collections and protecting visitors. So just to give you a little bit more information about myself very quickly, as Heather said, I am the Director of Security for the Addison Gallery. That's located on Phillips Academy campus, and I've been there since 2001 now, so I've seen quite a few changes through renovation projects and expansion projects and working with with moving collections off-site and all types of things. So I really have a wide range of experience with dealing with types of collections and then protecting them in different areas while we're going through some of these different projects. And also, as Heather mentioned, I'm also the elected president of the New England chapter, which is the IFCPP, International Foundation for Cultural Property Protection. And I've been the president now for New England chapter for 3 years, and this will be my fourth. So we're definitely doing a lot, and we would really welcome all of you to join our organization. It's free, and we do a lot of great activities and events quarterly. So let's move on here, and really my hope today is that we can have a discussion that will get us all thinking about museum safety and what we can do as institutions to better protect our collections, our visitors, and most importantly, our children, our staff, and all of those. So, Heather, maybe we can start off with a poll. We have a diverse group here, so really we want to find out if you guys could really quickly, we just want to find out if your institution has a security department, if it's one person or many, or no, we do not have any at all. It would just be an interesting idea to get an idea of how many people have actual security departments who are with us today, or one person dedicated to that.
And I also want to mention that today's session will be recorded and available on the NEMA website along with prior lunch with NEMA. So if you have to go out early or want to share this presentation with someone else in your museum or the field, go ahead to the NEMA website afterwards or later this afternoon, and there will be a recording there. So we have a good part saying that they do not have a dedicated security person or department. So right now it's 46 with the no and 28 with the yes.
Okay, great. Well, the good news is we're going to touch upon a number of things that every institution can do regardless of whether they have a security department or a dedicated staff member. So that's really the good part, is we're not trying to do things that are only geared towards a very large security department. We started off being very, very small and kind of worked our way up, but it's a good thing that the things that we're talking about today you could do regardless of any of these things. So what's been going on in the news that's caused those of us that are working in cultural property fields to kind of reevaluate the way that we're doing business? So what are the things that we're seeing? One would be an increase in violence, and I think most of us can agree that this has caused some institutions to panic and some to react hastily, and others like ourselves at the Addison Gallery are taking a step back and really focusing on revisiting our policies and our procedures. So regardless of what institution we work for, I think most of us can relate to the fact that our guard is really up. So really the goal here is to take a look at some of the things we as institutions should be thinking about. I'm going to start with, move on to me, sorry. Okay. So what are the goals or the aims? And really what I think about is it's really to provide an environment which is safe and welcoming and accessible for all ages and demographics. And when I think about a good protection plan, I really think about its being a concentric circle of protection, kind of similar to the chart on the right here. And by thinking about these things this way, we can begin to create a layered approach to security. So where perhaps we can learn that leaning too heavily on just one technology or maybe one vendor to solve all of our security concerns becomes a more vulnerable approach. So having many layers of protection, much like that of, say, a castle where you are first approached by a moat, and then you're looking at high walls and archers, etc., it starts to make sense. At the center of your circle is really going to be your life safety, and that should always be your priority. We want to concern ourselves with staff visitors and school groups, and that should always be what takes priority over anything else. So we really want to work from the outside and then work our way in. On the outer layer, we have the city and town relationships. And the idea here is to really create a direct relationship with local first responders. If you have not done so, you should really appoint someone to be the liaison between you and your institution. It doesn't have to be a security professional. That could be a registrar, it could be an associate director. But having somebody that really is the liaison between you and your first responders is really important. Typically, with the Addison Gallery, we have our fire department on site at least 6 times a year, and we have them regularly as a large fire detail for any kind of event that we have that would be over, say, 200 people. And having the department on site is really important because it gives them an idea of what entrance to use, what in an emergency, how to gain access to your facility, and who are the key people to work with. So I strongly recommend that you start on that outer level, and it doesn't cost anything to go down to your local police department or fire department and to just take a look and just chat with them. Invite them up to your facility, and you'll really gain some really insightful things from them. The next level is really going to be our building envelope, and those are obviously going to be your windows, your doors, but it also can be much more. There's a principle called CPTED, which is crime prevention through environmental design. And it's an interesting take on securing your perimeter, basically. So if you take a look at the picture at the right here, those red balls in the front entrance become an interesting and famous trademark design element, but they also act as a physical barrier to prevent a smash and grab incident. So those are very intentional, and it's done so to prevent somebody from, as you see in the news oftentimes, somebody with a pickup truck that's going to be going through that front entrance and maybe grabbing an ATM that's right inside there. So that's intentional. And there's other things as well. If we look at this picture, it's really a nice example. You have the addition of lights in the front. You have light posts there, which provide visibility at night. You have exterior cameras, which is obviously a deterrent, and additional curbing in front. So this is an inviting building. It's something that I would say is a welcoming place, and it's not a castle, for instance. Doesn't have high walls, but at the same time, it's taking these principles of CPTED and into mind to help secure its environment. So one of the things that I would do is encourage all of you to take a walk around your facility and to just look at the easily solvable issues. A lot of times I will go to a museum or a natural history museum or a historical facility, and you'll see that there's large overgrown shrubs out front, or poor lighting, or lights that are just out. So these are some things that are really easy to do, but also really important to think about when you're looking at your building envelope. The next layers are really going to be your devices. And these are really your motion detectors. This would be any kind of glass break detectors, surveillance cameras if you have them, and access controls, obviously, if you have those, and then there's the physical locks. Now, the key here is to make sure that these systems are all functioning and are tested regularly. So we'll do testing once a month, and we'll document that testing. And it's important to realize that if you do have any kind of intrusion detection system, that you know who is doing your alarm testing. If it's not you, if it's a vendor, are you getting documentation that it was done, and you're getting regular reports that things are operating properly? So again, this is something that's very easy to do. It just takes a little bit of time to try to implement this. The other thing I want to mention, if you have keys, any kind of hard key that you're issuing, how are they being tracked, and how many keys are out there in the environment that have been lost? So one of the things that you may want to think about is recoring your doors, for instance. It's something that's not too expensive, but at least you know that you have complete control of the keys that are in the environment right now. And then the other thing is active patrols. As we get further into the center, it may be one of your best defenses, and it doesn't need to be done by any type of security professional who, for instance, is walking around in the morning opening up your institution. Are they looking for damage, leaks, any kind of odd smell, smoke? These are the people that really are your first line of defense, but they just can't be the people who walk in and just turn the lights on and sit down. They have to actually be actively aware and alert, and they need to be trained properly. And we can get into that a little bit more. That's something that I'm really, really a fan of, is training, and as we get further along, we'll see a little bit more of what are the things that we can do and are doing in the training field. And then lastly, in the center, we have our collections and our assets, and the questions around this would really be, how are they housed and how are they hung on the wall? What kind of cabinets are you using? Are they locking cabinets? How are your pedestals secured? All these things are just one more layer that are inexpensive ways to either fasten and secure using your objects, either to wall, to floors, and using appropriate security hardware. Are these, for instance, alarmed objects? These are all things that we look at as we go into this concentric circle in protection. And again, just to reiterate, the priority is also going to be, and primarily, the bullseye is life safety. So that's first and foremost in any kind of protection plan is life safety, obviously, is our biggest concern. The other thing that people may not realize is, as a security department, we are also really want to protect the visitor's experience. If you've had any type of bad interaction with someone, you most likely will not return. And we are so conscious of this as a security department. It's just one of our huge focuses that we have. And furthermore, everyone has access to things like TripAdvisor and Yelp, and they're using these regularly. It's very common and easy for you to have a bad experience and then pull out your phone and instantly review your institution. So this is something that we're very conscious about and that we're always looking to improve. Primarily we are security professionals, but that's just not enough these days. My goal is that all of our staff members be customer service specialists with a heightened sense of awareness. So, we don't run a paramilitary operation at our museum, and our interactions are intentionally geared towards that of being helpful. But however, just because we are helpful, it doesn't also mean that we're not very aware of what's going on around us, and capable of handling an emergency situation. So the goal really is for our visitors to know that we're there to help them, but to also enforce our policies equitably and also fairly. As I mentioned, I'm really big into the training, and that's one of the reasons why every member of our staff receives the same type of training. And when I say that, I mean our visitor services, our security department, our custodial departments. These three groups are the ones that I focus on most because they are most likely to engage with our visitors. You know, these are the interactions that can make or break any institution. And because they're commonly in the spaces or exhibition spaces, those are the ones that I focus on primarily. From there, I will then work with registrars and curators and other staff members, but primarily focus is these interactions with your visitors on a daily basis. You know, and additionally, we work closely with our custodial departments, and they're always a part of the process. But we also work with other departments like the curatorial staff because we really want to show artwork in the way that the artist intended it to be seen. You know, so if an object was supposed to be, you know, reside on the floor, we want to make sure that it does. The key is that we have conversations about doing so safely. So it's really a collaborative effort, and it really seems to work out well, but we're very, very focused on protecting that visitor's experience. It's important to understand the role of your front entry when we're talking about protecting that visitor's experience because it's also the first line of defense in an emergency, and it can be particularly a vulnerable area for those working in that space. It's also the first place that visitors will encounter your policies for the first time. And we'll talk a little bit more about policies later, but it's really important that those are posted and that they're readily accessible to your visitors. The other thing is, are those working at the front entrances, are they paying attention to who is entering the facility, and are they paying attention to what they're bringing in? And equally as important would be, are they aware of who is leaving and what they may be taking with them? So that front entry point needs to be a well-controlled space, and those people need to be trained properly. And the other question really becomes, when we look at this front entry point and assessing our front entrance, is how are we as institutions protecting our own employees? So, you know, one thing that we would do is we would install panic dress buttons that would be readily available to use in an emergency, and we would make sure that those are tested regularly. That's also a very inexpensive way to protect that front entry point. And also, the second thing would be training your staff members to recognize an issue potentially before they even arrived at your front entrance, and can they lock those doors down. So we want to make sure that whoever's in this front entrance post is really, be it a customer service, visitor services, security, that they just know what to do and are safe about it and are well trained. It's important that those working within the public space have a proper training to enforce your policies. So for instance, an institution may not have any security officers at all, but we have docents and we have volunteers that are working in the public regularly. So if it's done correctly, these people, if trained, could potentially be a part of your protection plan. So it really all depends on each institution's philosophy, but from my experience, most volunteers are happy to receive training. You know, because what it does is it shows that we as an institution care about the safety and their safety. It also provides a great opportunity to connect with staff and listen to their concerns. You know, we have a large front desk staff, and they recognize very quickly that they were potentially vulnerable. So giving these people just a little bit of training and really just to be a little bit more aware and to know that we're looking out after them as well is just a good opportunity and builds a nice relationship with this department. So it would really, it's something that I would consider you all looking at. It's simple to do but easy, and it really does make a difference. We've talked a lot about policies, you know, where they're posted. So this should really look familiar to most of you. What are your policies and where are they posted? Maybe you have something, I'm going to see if I have my pointer here, but maybe you have something like this where it says no food, you know, allowed in your exhibition spaces. Well, that's fine and that makes sense, but I really wanted to direct your attention down here to the bottom where it says persons who do not comply with gallery guidelines will be asked to leave the facility. Those who refuse will be subject to arrest. Now, this is really an important statement, and it should be listed in your public policies, and you should, if you don't already have these policies in place, you should start to maybe revisit them. Basically what this last sentence does is it's kind of tell your visitors the consequences of their actions if they do not follow the verbal direction of an institutional representative. And I say institutional representative because a lot of these the folks here may not have a security person working with them, so it becomes down to anyone who's really within your facility. So everyone needs to understand the policies that they're enforcing, and they need to be posted in public spaces. And visitors should really acknowledge them. One of the things that we do is we have our Visitor Services Department direct them to the policies when they walk in. So just so you know, please make yourself aware of our guidelines and visitor policies. And lastly, when you start drafting your policies or revisiting them, you really want to make sure that upper management is involved in these and that you consult with legal counsel when developing them. And to keep in mind that just because you develop these policies doesn't mean it's one and done. So we, for instance, revisited our policies, I don't know, a year or two ago when there was a big uptick in selfie sticks. So that was something that we started seeing a lot of and started to readdress our policies that we had them posted that we do not allow selfie sticks in the museum. And when we talk about the posted policies, we're essentially establishing our visitor guidelines. So it's important to understand who is tasked with enforcing them. And again, it goes back, it does not have to be a security personnel member. It could be anyone. But it's important that whoever is tasked with this is foremost trained in your institutional standards. So you don't want somebody to go off in a different direction that's against your policies, for instance. So it's really important that whoever is trained appropriately, and if you don't have the training, that you seek that out. So now that we've established that our policies have been revised, drafted, and reviewed through legal counsel, we also want to make sure that they're posted in a visible spot. The next thing would really start looking at conflict resolution and the steps that we can take to de-escalate a situation. Because now that you have these guidelines and policies, people will break them. So what we're trying to do here is really figure out how we can de-escalate a situation and resolve an issue. I mean, the real goal is really of any kind of conflict resolution is for everyone to come out a winner. So the ideal situation is a happy medium. You've asked a visitor to comply, they have, and they've moved on their way. That would be an ideal situation. But before we do that, we have to really start looking at something what I call situational analysis. And what that is it's before you even approach any visitor, it's important to take just a half a second to analyze a situation. And this can be done in less than a second. It's so fast, but it's really important that you're aware of it. And the first part is really to just assess the severity of the situation. So are you in immediate danger, and is the scene safe? That's a huge thing that anyone responding to any incident would really want to quickly analyze. If it's not a safe scene, then you shouldn't even be there. It's really a point of evacuation. And then the second part is to just make a plan in your head very quickly. Who can help me, and what training have I had that can help me through this? I mean, oftentimes it's really just calling for an additional support that might be your best answer, just calling for backup. The other thing is what you really need to do is try to maintain a sense of calmness and composure. I mean, that could be difficult depending on the severity of the situation or the threat, but it's really important to try to just very quickly take the snapshot and just really remember the details here, and it'll help you out a lot. This is a photo that I love. It's a great example of approaching any visitor. And I just want to take a look at the photo on the left and just see what's going on here. And you just start and you can look at the uniform itself. This is a security officer and approaching somebody, and it's professional. The uniform is professional. It's respectable, and she's also wearing her credential, which is really establishing her to other visitors as being a staff member or owner representative. And this is somebody that I would feel comfortable asking a question to. This is not a hard stance or an aggressive stance. It's really somebody that I could go to and ask a question to and feel very comfortable. I also want to point out that if you look at the distance she gives herself between her and the subject, that's probably a good 8 to 10 feet. She's not up close. She's not in a way that she could easily be pushed around. She's at a distance that's created a little bit of space, which is really important. And you also notice that she's elevated her hands a bit. So her hands are not in her pockets. They're not crossed. They're slightly elevated, and if need be, she could raise them and protect herself. If you look at her foot, her stance is well balanced, so it would really prevent her from really hopefully being knocked over. And the most important part is that she's really left an exit behind her. So if you're confronting any visitor, you really need to make sure that there's a means of escape, and that's really, really important. So it's really a great photo that summarizes a lot of these little things that can be done. And this is really, if anybody asks you a question, this is a great customer services posture, but also in a friendly way protects yourself and keeps you safe. So I really do like the approach, and I think that this is something that really we should be thinking of, and this is something I really train all of our officers to be aware of their surroundings and their own safety. So in an ideal situation, really you have a couple of things that happen. You really want to make sure that you're keeping your own safety in mind, and that you're have an appropriate approach, and that you have a greeting that's is maybe firm but is also very gentle. And you want to explain the rules, and you want to ask for compliance. And at this point, ideally, they would agree. You would thank them for understanding, have them, wish them a good day, and then you would move on. That would really be an ideal experience and non-confrontational way to enforce a policy, something small, perhaps. However, what happens if someone does not comply or refuses to comply? This is where anyone who enforces your policies needs to understand that your own institutional procedures and be trained to implement them. The last thing we really want is for our staff members to go rogue and to make a decision that's not in line with our policies. So really the question is, under what circumstances can we actually order someone to leave our facility? So maybe reasons like disturbing the peace, and that might be a good example, but legally we need to make sure that if we're doing this, that we're doing it consistently and within our own institutional's policy. So that's why it's so important that we're consulting with general counsel to help develop these guidelines and to also make them readily available to our visitors. So your visitors understand what their consequences are. once these policies are established, it's critical that our institutions apply them consistently to all guests and visitors, and that's so important, and that's where the training part comes in, so that anyone who has anything to do with frontline visitors and guests, children, school groups, that they're applying these policies consistently and to all guests and visitors. So really the first step is to ask for compliance, and if they refuse, then the staff member becomes an owner representative. And at that point, they have the authority to ask a person to leave your institution. If they do not leave, then the police may be called, and they're subject to arrest at that point. So they're no longer welcome, and they're technically trespassing at this point. The key really is to try to treat all of these people fairly, and that you are not biased in your decision, and that you are interpreting and following the written policies of your institution for ejecting unruly patrons. So that's why it's really important and critical that regardless of the size, a well-trained staff, and it doesn't matter if you're a large institution or small, it's just really getting down to a well-trained staff that has the ability to avoid liability and to potentially, in any potential public relations nightmares. So that's really the whole point of following those consistent policies. And I know it's tricky, and it's a hard subject, and we could spend days on this. Trust me, we could spend a lot of time. But really wanted to just kind of very quickly go through a chart that I created for the IFCPP. And what this is it's just a very quick guideline that really takes you through the general procedures for dealing with any type of unruly visitors. This is something that I can share with everyone later, but really it just goes through a couple little things here, and it kind of guides you in the right way. So really what it is if a visitor breaks a posted policy here, your staff member is just going to request for compliance. Maybe they explain the rules and say, can you please comply? If they comply, the interaction is over, and if they don't, it escalates down from here. You would then reiterate the rules, explain the rules if they're not in compliance, and you would hopefully the visitor complies, and interaction would be over. And it keeps going down from there. Next step was really be to announce the need to call for backup or a supervisor. And at that point, typically a guest will, they don't really want to escalate the situation, and they usually will comply by that point. And that's the real goal here. If they don't, a supervisor needs to be trained as well, and they need to come in. And that could just be a coworker. Having more than one person arrive on scene is helpful, and just by doing that escalates the situation and the severity of the incident, and the visitor hopefully understands. If they do, the interaction is over, and you will document this via the incident report. If they don't comply, this is where we get into what we were talking about earlier, which is the ejecting unruly patrons, and that is you will announce that you are no longer welcome here, and you call your local police department. And the police department will really escort them off premise. At that point, you will fill an incident report. One of the things to also keep in mind is this is just one of general guidelines, and it doesn't always follow in line with this. So that's why it's important to also have your staff looking at other programs like MOAB, which is Management of Aggressive Behavior. That's something that you may want to check out to hopefully prevent this from escalating. We always want to be in a de-escalating state. And as I said, guidelines and training, they're just not enough. Everything needs to be standardized. You have to have standardized guidelines, standardized consistent training. This year at the Addison, we really focused heavily on reviewing and updating all of our procedures, and we spent a lot of time defining how to respond to certain alarms and events. And really the next step for us is to do the standardized training and consistent training. So now, after a year of reviewing things, our next step is really to implement these new training programs so that each person within our department and others is responding in the same consistent manner and with the same consistent response. And if you noticed on the previous chart, we had talked about incident reporting. And if you don't have one, it's really easy to create, but we just want to make sure that it's important that every institution have a formal process for creating, for filing incident reports, and also for distributing incident reports. So if something happens on a weekend, we want to make sure that on Monday that the proper people are aware of what happened. So just think about that very quickly, and there are a lot of ways that you can file an incident report or create one, but we want to make sure that that also is standardized. So some of the training programs that we've worked on and are working on now currently at our museum, all types of things within the legal considerations, ejecting unruly patrons. We're talking a lot about those things. We're talking about proper patrols, code of conduct and customer relations. Those are all huge. And also we do a lot of systems trainings. So, how to reset alarms, for instance, surveillance systems, and emergency evacuation procedures, fire protection, disaster recovery, all types of things that we're working on and revisiting. So it's not just enough to secure your collections from, say, theft, but we're also thinking about disasters and fire and all types of things. So it's important that we're well-rounded as a department and as a group, and that what we learn, we then are able to then show others within our institution. So I just wanted to quickly pause for a second, and if that's just a lot of information, if there are any questions, maybe we could kind of tackle that now. And then I really wanted to touch upon the active shooter situation. It's a really important program, and I want to make sure that we definitely touch upon this in the next 15 or 20 minutes or so. Is there any questions that on what we've kind of covered so far?
The group is a little quiet right now, so if you guys do have any questions, go ahead and start typing it in on that one. So have you ever had to call the police at the Addison?
Yes, we've had incidents in the past, and they were resolved. I mean, it does come down to the point where, we do, we try to manage the situation as best we can, and in times we've had people who've come in intoxicated, and it's a great opportunity to say, we've got some great artwork outside, let's take a look. So there are other things that we can do to kind of de-escalate that situation. So yeah, but it has happened.
Okay. So we do have a question. Virginia was wondering if you ever review the incident reports with your team and recap how it went.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great, fantastic question. So yeah, so if we get an incident report where there's more questions, we're definitely going to revisit that group of people who are working on that day, and we're going to talk to all parties to make sure that we have a full picture of what had happened. And oftentimes, it's oh, well, this person said this person said that. So we have, we will go back and we will look at, if there are video, we will look at video, and we'll try to get a real understanding of what had happened and how it was handled. And that's a great training tool for us to say, okay, well, this is what worked, this is what has not worked in that situation. So, and then from there, everyone's using it as a learning opportunity. And there's other things. There are times where you may get an email or a letter in the mail that says that somebody was maybe treated unfairly, and those are also great opportunities to review with our team of what had happened and to go back and kind of figure out, okay, well, what can we do better? We're always trying to think about what we as an institution can do more effectively and better. Yeah, that's a great question, though.
Okay.
So.
Someone typing in a question, so I don't know if you want to wait, or we can wait until we take a break again to answer Betsy's question.
Okay, yeah, no, yep, that's great. So we'll just keep moving here, and then we'll come back to Betsy. Yeah, so the active shooter situation, it's on all of our minds. The agreed upon definition of an active shooter is really an individual actively engaged in killing or attempting to kill people in a confined and populated space. And these situations are incredibly unpredictable, and they evolve quickly, and they end almost as quickly. So really, what can we do? I mean, this is a really tricky one. And the mentality of an active shooter is really the desire to kill or seriously injure, without concern. They're accepting any targets of opportunity, and they're moving through the building until stopped by law enforcement, or other intervention. So it's a really, really tricky, hard thing to really protect yourself against and to train because it's so unpredictable. If you look at some of the numbers that were just released for the FBI, this is for 2016, between 2016 and 2017, you'll know there were 50 shootings, and of these 50 shootings, all 50 were male individuals, and 3 of which wore body armor during the course of the shootings. Of the 50 individuals, 13 ended up committing suicide, and 11 had been killed by police. 8 were stopped by citizens, and 18 had been apprehended. 20 of these shootings met the mass killing definition, which is 4 or more casualties, I believe. So this is a serious thing, and I know that we're all focused on this. It's one of these huge topics. So what are the challenges for us? I mean, really, what do we do here, and what can we do? So, the challenges are, really visitors are unfamiliar with our floor plans. They don't understand our physical layout of the building. If you have access controls, well, they can be limiting. They can limit your egress. And taking refuge into any type of room may not be an option if you have a large open public space like an exhibition area or a gallery. So these are really challenging buildings. We want to be as open as possible, but we also need to be secure. So how do we do that? And the other thing is really to think about, if you do have an access control system, you got to really understand your configurations, and they really need to be considered carefully. So one of the things that we did was we created a crisis mode that in any emergency we can switch to, and it's just a push of one button that then gives access to anyone with a swipe card. It gives them access to areas that they previously never had access to. So they can seek refuge in other areas just by giving them additional access if you have these types of systems. But it's just something to really be careful of. So really, again, the common thread is that it comes down to training and it also, an effective entry screening process, how your front entrance is being, operated, well-rehearsed plan. These are really important things that you can do and can do, today. Sure, some of you are familiar with ALICE. That's the Alert, Lockdown, Inform, Counter, and Evacuate. That's being taught by police departments all over the country. If you have not gone through this program, reach out to your local law enforcement agency. I'm sure they'll be happy to come out and facilitate this training for you and your staff. Another program that some are using is this Run, Hide, Fight program. These are some interesting photos. I just wanted to show you this very quickly. This is our museum. And one of the concerns that we had identified at the security department was a potential vulnerability in staff offices, which were on the second floor of our museum. And so above the office spaces, there's a catwalk, which is that middle photo here. And that catwalk leads to a large machinery room. And we thought that this would be a great option to if you needed to hide, and would provide an additional option if needed in any kind of lockdown at our facility. So with a little funding, we fabricated the ladder, which is on the left side here. And the ladder goes up to this catwalk. And once you get to the top, you have a lockable mesh gate, which is the far right photo. So this really was a great option for getting our staff members, into a safe location quickly if evacuation was not possible. So I would also recommend that your institution start looking at these little things that can be done to maybe provide refuge in an emergency situation. So previously there was no ladder up to this catwalk. You had to go around. But now with this ladder, you could very quickly get up there and then lock that door. So we really want to make sure that we're evaluating a bunch of different things, and something like this, which had been there for years, this catwalk, has now created a nice spot, if needed to, an additional exit route or ability to shelter. So it was really a simple, low-cost option that you may also have the ability to do. The other thing is really it's important to practice your lockdown procedures and your shelter-in-place drills. So each year, our security staff, our custodian staff, all these people are going through an exercise in barricading doors and hallways, similar to the photo seen on the right here. So, you really, you can't, as an institution, you really shouldn't be afraid of doing these drills. We find that everyone learns something and takes, the takeaways are very important. So it's simple to do, and yet it's effective. So how long does it take you to barricade a door? Well, it might take 10 minutes, but you don't have 10 minutes. You need to figure out how you can do this in 10 seconds or 20 seconds. So by doing these things, we're really learning a little bit more each time, but it's simple. And I would just make sure that you guys aren't afraid, and you should do these drills. The other thing is to point out, the difference between shelter-in-place and lockdown. Shelter-in-place really being more of an environmental or weather emergency, where lockdown would be primarily an active shooter. So this is our floor plan from our museum. This is the ground floor level. And what it does is it's just showing our nearest exits. You want to make sure that everyone working in our facility knows where the closest exits are in any type of emergency. You have to keep in mind that these are the people who will help guide those visitors unfamiliar with their surroundings to safety. So I'd also like to point out that if you hire new employees or you have new hires, that reviewing your evacuation plan, that it's something that they receive during their new hire orientation, and that you not wait long for that. So really that's something that you really want to kind of like put in your packet of new hires. Like, this is where your exit routes are, and then walk that with them. Make sure they're familiar with it. It's not just an active shooter situation in which you may evacuate your building. It could be a power outage, for example, or or some other type of incident. So barely you want to evacuate in an orderly, safe fashion. Unlike this photo on the right here. That really is your goal. So a composed, trained staff who has practiced these safe evacuations is important. And I'd also like to point out with this electrical outage here, if you have a power outage and your policy is to evacuate your building, that you have members of your staff doing an audit of what's on the walls before they leave. So to get your visitors and guests out, and then do an audit of what's there. And then on the re-entry, once you have established your power, that you go through and you do another one, and that you're really paying attention to, okay, we want to make sure that it is exactly as we had left it. It's just a potentially, a good opportunity, a theft opportunity where power goes out. That's an easy opportunity for someone that you're creating. So you just want to make sure that you're really being very aware of any kind of power outage in your facility. We talked about active patrols as being part of a protection plan, and the person in charge of either opening or closing, that might be a good person, but regardless, you want somebody who's alert and pays attention, and the real thing comes down to, the saying, if it's a small leak that was found, reported, and repaired, can save you in the long run from becoming something that's much larger and does a lot of damage, and it's very costly. So so really, these are simple, very effective things that you can do, and they cost nothing. And it could be your cleaner in the morning that's doing these types of things. But really having an active patrol and teaching them of what they should be aware of and what they should be looking for is really important. A lot of people ask me about low-cost solutions and what they can do. And I know we talked about that, and we have been, with patrols and talking about policies and revisiting policies. Other things like having a collection policy, working very closely with your registrar department, inventorying objects, those are also important. But I would also suggest institutions conduct a security audit and and that's really to evaluate your current and future needs. So by having a security audit or having this report, you're likely to have the attention of administrators and who will also maybe be able to allocate funds to support your needed upgrades. So typically, if I was doing a security audit, I would break this down into 3 categories. One, which would be your immediate needs, or fix this now, your short, and then your long-term improvements. So that's just a really handy document to have that shows that you are aware of concerns and that you're moving forward to address these concerns. And administrators love that type of stuff. So another thing is really this is an exhibition that we have on display, and one thing that you can do is really to just create clear checklists for closing your facility or document instructions that really standardize a process. So the picture shown in this is really an exhibition where there are many objects on display, and we're providing a photocopy on the right. So really all you're doing is twice a day we have someone come in and they inventory each object. And it's a simple solution of being accountable. And the other thing is really leveraging existing contracts. So vendors can often provide training at no cost. So we work very closely with our fire alarms services vendor, and we provide live fire extinguisher training to all of our staff members annually because this is something that we just negotiated in the contract. It didn't cost us anything, but we get a lot out of it. So I would really go back and look at your vendors and look at your, what you can do to really, maybe you can get some free training out of some of these. I'm also a huge fan of the scenario-based training, which I'm sure you've gathered by now. These are really in response to a flood emergency, and we're using blue tarps to simulate water damage. And very quickly, I know we only have a couple of minutes, and I definitely want to leave time for questions, is we are also very focused on our disaster planning and preparedness. So this cartoon really kind of explains it all. But one of our concerns is really being prepared for any type of a disaster. So we're looking at things like fire, which is still our museum's biggest threat, and we're training staff members to handle any potentially and resolve these things. We've got supplies that locate on each floor, so we want to make sure that they're available to people. And just in March, we had I wrote a grant that was funded by the Abbott Academy Fund, and what that allowed us to do, which we're very grateful for, is to host a 3-day disaster preparedness training drill and training workshop. And 100 people attended. It was represented by 70 institutions. We're talking about salvage priority items, the importance of disaster planning, mitigating risk, all types of stuff. And it ended with which I think is really funny, a hands-on mock disaster scenario in one of our galleries where participants had to put what they had been taught to the test. So it was really a fun exercise, and I think people had a good time with it. So here's some photos of us triaging types of things. So as a security department, we're talking about all types of things, and it's not just, it's the safety of the collections as well, so we want to make sure that we're definitely prepared. And I just really, really quickly want to talk about the technologies and how we evaluate our process. Often I get questions about what technologies we choose and why we chose them. The approach is really first evaluating our current technologies, and with that, can we leverage any of the existing opportunities and expand our current systems to work for us. At the same time, we're investigating emerging technologies, always trying to figure out what's the next big thing that may come up and down the line, and then obviously adoption of proven technologies. This is a system from Acuity VCT that we installed a while back, which has been very helpful for us, which basically allows us to alarm all these paintings that are in the software. So if you get too close, we're getting an alarm. And what that does is that can then trigger any type of an alert to via text message, email, down to your control room, all types of things. So it's been a really good system, and we've been happy with that. And also looking at access control systems and putting all types of threat levels in and all types of things that we can really use. And then lastly, the very last thing is really, these are 4 principles that I wanted to leave you with, and they're from the Department of Homeland Safety, and really Homeland Security. And really what it is it's It's very simple. It's connect, plan, train, and report. And connect is really, what we talked about. Connect with your local law enforcement agencies and your first responders. Plan. Take the time to plan things out. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be a perfect plan, but what it does do is it starts the conversations within your organization, and that's super important. And then obviously the training aspect, train your staff, train them often. And then lastly, it's just report something. If you see something, just be alert. If something seems off, report it. So that's really, I just want to leave a couple minutes for questions. I know it's been a lot, and like I said, I could talk for weeks on this stuff. So if you have additional questions that we can't get to today, please feel free to contact me. I'm happy to share anything with you or help you out. I can reach this contact information. But yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate the time. If there's any questions, I would happily be willing to answer them at this time.
So if anybody does have any questions, if you just want to type them in there. I do have a kind of an unofficial question from Betsy, and she was wondering if you have student workers, do you ask them to put their phones away before work? I know that's a big one because I've seen that happen at all sorts of museums. So that was kind of just what Betsy was asking. Is that
no, that's a great question. So what we will do is we do not take phones away, but we are very clearly managing that floor, and if we see them on the floor, using phones or sitting down, then that's something that we do address. So we want to make sure that the perception that any visitor sees is first and foremost of an alert, well-trained staff. So if you're on the phone, that's completely against what we really want to portray. So we won't take a phone away, but we'll definitely address it. Does that make sense?
And then Jane was kind of asking, you touched upon it briefly, and you did mention D-Plan earlier about natural emergency responses as part of your security planning. I would also check out D-Plan. That's a great resource, too, to take a look at for some of the natural disaster part of that.
Yeah.
So Cynthia actually mentions that a phone is a tool for information safety. I support having them in a pocket, but agree, let's not see them until they're needed for museum things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, a lot of emergency, messaging comes through your cell phones now, so yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I think there's a lot to process, and you definitely gave a lot of food for thought on this lunch with NEMA and stuff like that. Does anybody have any last-minute questions before we hit the 1 o'clock hour? And Austin is available, after the webinar and stuff like that if you do want to contact him for questions or further details on something.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we're just getting the thanks. Yep. So I just want to say thank you to everybody for joining us today, and thank you again, Austin, for revising your very first Lunch with NEMA again for us in 2018. That was kind of awesome. Always good to have a recap and stuff like that. And as I did mention earlier, we did record the webinar, so it will be available on the NEMA website later this afternoon. And I want to thank everybody, and hopefully you can join us for upcoming Lunch with NEMA. We have various topics coming up. Austin, do you have any closing words?
No, I just say, really thank everyone for, taking the time out, and really just, if you leave with anything, just revisit those policies and start a training program. It can start small and really become something big and huge and really helpful for your institution. So definitely take a look at those things, and good luck.
All right. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day.
Thank you.